Colorado's first red flag gun confiscation case shows this law is as confusing as it is controversial. We learned something important today about the mystery drones, something specific to look for. Investigators say a political conspiracy theorist was planning a child kidnapping in the suburbs. And the no parking signs that appear without warning. Do you have to obey them? Let's find out next. All the passion, all the debate over Colorado's red flag gun confiscation law, all those arguments about rights and public safety, you had to know it was going to come down to a flowchart in two parts. Our Marshall Zellinger has the inside story of how lawyers have been furiously preparing for the first known test case.
This is a process map that we developed.
You know that thing where you and your coworkers stand around a whiteboard and shout out ideas?
This is the hearing. We are now just had the temporary restraining order hearing.
The Denver City Attorney's Office basically did that while trying to prepare for every situation under the state's new red flag law.
What if this happens? What if this happens? How about this scenario? And it was a months-long process of brainstorming various scenarios that could happen.
Scenarios like we detailed on Friday, a domestic violence case at the end of last year. A man turned over 2 guns to Denver police as part of the domestic violence investigation. But since no charges are going to be filed, the guns need to go back to that person. But DPD says there's been a credible threat because he made suicidal statements, and police don't want to give the guns back just yet.
This whole law is put in place to protect individuals from harm to themselves or others.
What makes this red flag case unique is that police already have the guns, instead of what might be more of a typical scenario where they're seeking a judge to order the person to turn in their guns.
I don't think it would have served the purpose of the law to return it and then try to retrieve it again.
There's another scenario that is not yet mapped out on this flow chart, and it really concerns the city attorney's office. A scenario where a judge in Denver approves the removal of someone's guns, but that someone lives in a different county.
The person who has the guns could live in Weld County, for example, but the person wanting to file the extreme risk protection order could file that in Denver. Denver could grant it, but then Weld County has to enforce it. And there is no real mechanism to, then what, if enforcement is refused.
This is what happens after lawmakers pass a bill and then it gets to it's like your boss. Your boss puts something into play and then it's like, oh, I have to implement this. It's the if yes, move here, if no, move here, and it goes on and on and on, Kyle. And like we finished that story with, it does not take into account if it starts in one county but relies on another county to enforce it.
Yeah, all of a sudden you get into one of those, 50% of Colorado counties where conservative sheriffs say they won't enforce this law, and your flow chart doesn't flow. It just stops, like right at the beginning.
It stops at that point, and that would rely on a judge perhaps then either holding that person, that sheriff, in contempt. I don't know if the judge could then order a different jurisdiction to take over, if it falls on the attorney general. This is just Denver's plan that they're sharing with other cities. It does not take into account what if the state has to get involved.
Overflow, one might say. Thank you, Marshall. The Great Plains Great Drone Mystery is taking an interesting turn today. If you believe the government agencies that came out and spoke this morning, the FAA, the military, the local law enforcement officers, if you believe that they're telling the truth, that they are truly in the dark about those large drones flying grids over Colorado and Nebraska, then whoever is running that operation, running the drones, they are openly breaking the law and defying demands to reveal themselves. The Great Drone Summit of 2020 was held at a golf course in Brush. 77 agencies sent people without firm answers about the drones that have been buzzing over rural areas at night for weeks. Northcom, which oversees military activity across North America, says those drones are not military, any branch. Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming, which watches the missile silos dotting the plains, they directly denied to us that it was them. And if you're tempted to dismiss this as just people who don't know a satellite at night from a drone, listen to the sheriff of Sedgwick County.
A couple nights ago, I was actually sitting in my house eating dinner, and I heard what sounded like a low-flying helicopter come in over the town, and went outside and I saw what is consistent with what we've been seeing over the last couple weeks.
The Phillips County Sheriff offered the first public description of a so-called command vehicle that they think is controlling these synchronized drones. Described it as a closed box trailer or large van with antennas, they said, that does not belong in the area. does not belong in the area, which will be every trailer or van with an antenna until this gets sorted out. Parker police say a far-right conspiracy theorist was planning a kidnapping in Douglas County. Investigators say that she believed her child had been taken by a satanic pedophilia ring of Democrats that is being secretly battled by President Trump. That's the QAnon conspiracy theory. Police say her child had actually been removed by Child Protective Services. Cynthia Absug was arrested last week up in Montana on a charge of conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Investigators say a fellow QAnon believer, who she called a sniper, had come to live with her, and that fellow QAnon members were planning this raid to kidnap the child. Absug is currently out on bond. Parker police say QAnon extremists have been identified by the FBI as a domestic terrorism threat. These QAnon believers think that President Trump is fighting a secret war against a satanic global child trafficking ring made up of Democratic politicians and Hollywood stars. It's a sign of how Denver's development can cause little everyday inconveniences. You know, those no parking signs that seem to pop up without warning all around town due to construction. Turns out that sign can actually work in your favor, and it buys you some time to get your vehicle out of there if you know how the system is enforced. And Anusha Roy can explain.
Yeah, Kyle, I don't think I've ever studied a no parking sign so closely in my entire life, but we started noticing that the signs have gone up in front of cars that were already parked on the street. On the rare occasion, they were just kind of showing up overnight, and it really looked like a whole bunch of people were about to get in some pretty expensive trouble, except when this sign first goes up, it's actually a warning. The city is requiring contractors to give you a 24 hours heads up to clear out, and those signs is how they're doing it. Now, after that time period, you're either going to get a ticket, which is what you might expect, but if it's a city project, you might get the delightful surprise of walking out to your car to realize it is missing because the city can have it towed to a nearby block to get it out of the way of the work that is being done. So, in order to find your car when it goes missing like that, you have to call the Denver Police non-emergency number. They're going to tell you what that location is, and then you get slapped with like a $100 towing fee, and then you're on your merry way. So
the key is to know when the sign showed up.
Exactly.
Then you know when your grace period begins.
Exactly. That's the 24-hour. And interesting enough, the city gets paid every time the contractor is setting aside parking like this and putting up those no parking signs, kind of along the same lines as getting money every time a contractor is shutting down a lane of traffic as well, which can add up to a lot.
Yeah, we've covered that before.
Yeah.
You're driving down a street and all of a sudden
like,
the road gets cut in half and some contractor just decided that they need it to
Exactly.
work safely. Yeah, city cashes in on that. All right, thank you, Anusha. Colorado's Democrats are playing musical chairs with the U.S. Senate race, and now we know who is the first to be left without a seat when the music ends. State Senator Angela Williams never got traction in the Democratic primary for U.S. Senate. That's the race to face Republican Senator Cory Gardner. And while Williams was running for that seat, a fellow Democrat announced that he wanted hers. State Rep James Coleman picked up some early key endorsements. He was in a good position to beat her in the primary. So today, Williams walked. She said that she will not run for re-election. Colorado's Republican Senator Cory Gardner emerged from hiding for some impeachment questions today. That is a rare instance. He briefly talked to reporters at the Capitol who asked him about former National Security Advisor John Bolton, saying that he would testify if witnesses are called in the Senate. Multiple journalists transcribed Gardner's response as, "You guys want to have a trial by Twitter, but is Nancy Pelosi going to follow the Constitution? Until she has the articles sent over, there is no trial." Now, obviously, we would prefer to ask elected officials our questions directly, but Senator Gardner does not respond to our questions, so we figured that you should probably just hear anytime he makes a rare comment about impeachment. The only political animal with more at stake in 2020 than Senator Gardner is the gray wolf, and we learned today that Coloradans are going to vote on whether to reintroduce the wolves that once lived and loved in Colorado but had a little habit of making snacks out of our livestock. Wolf activists collected enough good signatures. The Colorado Secretary of State affirmed that today. So Colorado Parks and Wildlife studied this idea of wolf reintroduction, and they decided that it was not a good idea. Opponents say letting voters make delicate ecological decisions like we vote on library taxes is bonkers.
I'm very dedicated in making my son's legacy and helping individuals with special need. I'm dedicated to that.
A family we met on Next and cannot forget. finds itself in a tough place again. And we just call them strong winds. The experts call them Chinook winds. And one viewer hopes we can explain the difference. And another sad shakeup for Colorado's oldest craft brewery. Next. The most Colorado thing we saw today is the natural progression of our statewide inclination to slap our flag on anything. Next time you buy a car, tell them you want it flag colored or no deal. The next viewer named Elena spotted this ride in Aurora off Havana near Alameda. If you see something that screams Colorado, share it with us. We'll share it statewide. Email next@9news.com or say hey with the hashtag #HeyNext.
You're just about through your Monday, and the winds are finally starting to ease for some areas. Downtown Denver, a little calmer, quieter, but a chilly day. Temperatures seasonal in the 40s, but after 60s on Saturday, you definitely felt the chill in the air. And the pressure gradient easing as the latest trough moves into the Midwest. High pressure rebuilds ahead of the next weather maker. And as the low and high come together and that gradient tightens, the wind will return. The northwest flow aloft, bringing in the high cloud cover, a bit of snow to the northern mountains. But tonight, the winds will shift out of the west-southwest and then go northwest. Calmer in Denver and along the I-25 corridor, but still very blustery from Nederland up to Fort Collins into Cheyenne and Red Feather Lakes, where high wind warnings may be reinstated again tomorrow. Less wind in the city, fair skies and 24 tonight, but the wind continues west of town. Mid-50s for the next couple of days, a nice warming trend ahead of a mountain storm on Wednesday. 20% chance of snow in Denver late Thursday into Friday. Friday clearing and cool. The weekend looks dry. Next storm I'm tracking comes Sunday into Monday of next week. And beautiful sunrise and sunset shots coming in on our digital network tonight. We thank you.
Our next question comes from a viewer named Tom, curious about whether the strong winds we've seen lately are considered Chinook winds. He was wondering what makes a Chinook wind different. So we asked meteorologist Kylie Burse.
Today's wind is actually considered a Bora wind because it's coming from a more northerly direction. Bora wind has more to do with pressure systems, where Chinook winds happen because of mountainous terrain. Here in Colorado, we've got those gorgeous east-facing foothills. So when we have a wind that comes straight in from the west, those winds race down the side. Here's what happens. When the wind goes down a mountain, the air warms and loses moisture. On average, air warms about 5.5 degrees for every 1,000 feet. Because they're so warm, sometimes they're called snow eaters. They can melt a foot of snow on the ground in just one day. If there isn't any snow to melt, they can dry out vegetation, and that's why they're especially dangerous when it comes to fire danger. Why do we call them Chinook winds? Well, they're actually named for the Native American people who live in the Pacific Northwest, where the air mass originates. And we're not the only one with wind like this. You've probably heard of the Santa Ana winds in California during fire season, and in Switzerland, when wind goes down the Alps, it's called the fun winds.
Fun winds. All right, put our next team to work answering your nagging questions about Colorado, anything about it, or we settle a bet between you and somebody you know. We'll get the answer. Our contact information never changes. You know how to find us. It's on the other side, wasn't it? I pointed to the wrong side. How long have we been doing the show? I point to the wrong side. Boulder Beer, Colorado's oldest craft brewery, is having a sad sort of back and forth decline these days. Announced that they're going to close their brew pub on January 18th. The owner posted on social media about an opportunity to sell the building. Perhaps you remember Boulder Beer initially announced in October that it was going to end distribution, so it wouldn't be in stores anymore. You could only get it there at the pub. And then last month, another shift, they agreed to let Sleeping Giant Brewing Company in Denver brew and package their beer for them, so you would be able to get it everywhere. And now, with the closing of the pub, that will be the only place where you can have Boulder Beer. The owner did say that a future location isn't out of the picture.
My son was on to something, and you know, he knew exactly what he was saying, and he knew exactly what he wanted, and I'm glad that we were able to provide it.
A father who promised here that he would carry on his son's legacy admits he's going to need some help. And the snow can excuse a lot of bad parking, but I'm not sure that's the case here. That's next. I asked you, who's the most impactful person we have met together in 3 years of Next? I'm guessing more than a few of you would say Seb Holliday and his father. We met them in early 2018. Seb's father wanted to create a recreation center where young people of all physical ability levels could play together. Keithan called his son his hero. Seb told us that his dad was his best friend. Sebs Rec Center was created in Aurora, and Seb passed away in June of 2018. Today, his father was honest with us about the cost of keeping up his son's legacy.
This is a typical Monday.
I won't be on television doing my curls.
Oh, well, get the curl bar. We are catering to a lot of individuals with special needs. This is my son's legacy. His goal was to create a facility dedicated to people like himself, which was disabled. The center is for everyone, but we cater to people with special needs. Get strong, baby. We need help. We need a grant writer. We need people that are interested, or organizations that are interested in supporting the disabled community, so that we can have my son's legacy to continue, so that we can continue to help other people that are in need for a place to go for recreation. High five. And I'm at a point now to where I really need the help, because my funds are not rich, and my funds won't last forever.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad.
High five, buddy. Good job. It's a need. It's not something that I'm trying to be rich. If I'm going to be rich, it's rich in helping people. That's what I want to be rich in. How many people can I help before I pass away? The same thing my son wanted. How many people can he help before he passed away? Oh, well, my son was on to something, and you know, he knew exactly what he was saying, and he knew exactly what he wanted. And I'm glad that we were able to provide it.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Bye.
See you soon.
All right, I'll be here.
Bye.
I'll see you, ma'am.
This article on 9news.com has details about the effort to keep Sebs Rec Center alive. Next, viewers are strongly divided about whether one story in this newscast was a story at all. And a viewer's ear caught something important, or was it impotent? There is a difference, I guess, and that's next. We don't call out line crossers very much anymore, but this is good or bad. Our viewer Greg captured a cliffhanger in Durango. There's some regret involved in this, some regret and some lack of skill. Keep the pictures coming. We have a high bar for these days, but that guy crossed both the bar and the cliff. Paula Taylor says there's nothing to the drone story, doesn't see what the big deal is. Elizabeth says she's believing it's a big deal because people can't figure it out. And I think that's where I am on this one right now. See you next time.